I am Brad Keelor. She is Beena Ajmera. Find out next on Director's Cut what her experience was like learning to drive in India.
Take a ride, there's a party over there that ain't no job. It's live, it's all the way live. Don't even have to walk, don't even have to drive. Just slide, slip it, slide. Just forget about the troubles in your 9 to 5 and just sail on. That's what you do, just sail on. Now the dude's so funky, hey, what do you think?
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every week, I sit down with a different GI member who has stories to tell. Some of them are personal, some are professional, all of them are fun. If you are not familiar with the Geo-Institute, we are a technical society of about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists. You can find out more information about us at geoinstitute.org. If you like what you see today, and I think you will, you should do two things. You should click subscribe, you should click get notifications, and we will let you know every single time we post something new to the YouTube channel. With those instructions out of the way, we will welcome our guest this week all the way from Iowa State University, where she is an assistant professor. It is Beena Ajmera. Beena, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
We are going to have a good time, as is our custom on Director's Cut every week. We have 10 questions, maybe a bonus at the end, and 2 of those questions are always the same. We start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
So I'm a faculty member, which means that my job has 3 things: research, teaching, and service. Basically, I get to work on trying to solve some of our unanswered questions, get to inspire and teach the next generation of people that are going to solve our problems and bring us new things to work on. And then also I get to help out with the Geo-Institute and any other professional group that I think is cool and fascinating and contribute my expertise in those areas.
And we will be talking a little bit more about that later, especially your involvement with our student competitions. But we have to ask some fun questions on Director's Cut too, or it wouldn't be Director's Cut. No one would watch. The first one that we have to ask, you know, one of the most basic questions in the world is, what is your favorite color? But we are not going to ask that. We are going to ask, do you have a color combo that you absolutely cannot stand? Or alternatively, one that you just love, that you think goes together beautifully?
So I don't have one that I really hate, nor one that I really, really love. If you've seen me at the geo-congresses over the past 10 plus years, you'll see me in all sorts of random colors, including owning a yellow and a pink suit. So I don't think I have one that I dislike.
Was that hard to make that jump? Have you always been a bright color person, or was it a conscious decision to start doing that?
I just think that a lot of clothes, so growing up, we had a lot of Indian clothes that I wore, and a lot of Indian clothes have lots of different colors in it. So I think that I would be a little bored if I was in all black or all gray or all blue, and hence the colors.
Makes you pop a little bit. That's always good. I, too, am an aficionado of bright colors. I love them. So you're currently at Iowa State. You're at North Dakota State. You've been at institutions with relatively few geotech faculty. What does that mean for you? What is the impact of that? I would guess it means you get to work on a pretty diverse research portfolio, but what does it mean for you?
So, having been at institutions with, both Cal State Fullerton and North Dakota State, I was one of 2 geotechnical faculty, and it meant that I got to teach a lot of cool classes and truly work on a diverse set of research questions. And I think that's just because it's my nature to be involved in a lot of different things, and so I got to work on a lot of different things because I wasn't stepping on anyone's turf. This has meant that I got to do everything from ground modification, slope stability, geotechnical earthquake engineering, climate change, anything else that fancied me, I got to work on, which is really, really fun because no day is the same.
So we were going to ask, what was the worst movie that you've ever watched all the way through? But we will save that for another week, because in the preparation for the show, I found out that for a huge portion of your life, you have not even owned a TV set. So what are some of the other things that you got into while you were not watching movies and wasting your time like millions of other youths?
Well, I'm not sure it's a waste of time to be watching TV. I just think I have other interests aside from watching TV. And for the record, I still don't own a TV. So basically my entire life, I haven't had one. Some of the fun things, I love traveling. So I've been to 5 continents out of 7. I have 2 more to go. I've been to, I don't know how many countries, but I've also visited 2 antipoles, which is basically 2 points on the Earth that are direct opposites of each other. So the North and South Pole would be an antipole, but there's also some other ones. Well, any location you can find what your antipole would be from where you're currently standing. I've also been in both the North and South Hemisphere at the same time, and the East and West Hemisphere at the same time, with, you know, the 1 foot on each side, straddling type of an idea. I like learning new things, and I'm frequently learning new stuff, whether that's technical, geotechnical related, or civil engineering related, or just fun, non-professional stuff like languages or learning to cook, make chocolates. When I'm not traveling and I do have some downtime, I like reading and cross-stitching and embroidery and all the stuff that you would, I guess, normally imagine a granny doing, but I am not one.
Not a lot of people bust out the term antipole. So I must ask you, from where you are right now, do you know where your antipole is from?
No, I don't. I haven't looked it up yet.
I believe ours in Washington, D.C. is somewhere in Indonesia somewhere. It might be a little further south than that, actually, I guess. But I'm trying to think where it is on the globe. But that's a great term. You're the first person to use it on Director's Cut. I'm a geography nerd, so anybody who drops something like that into the conversation is going to get asked about it. And so we have mentioned that you are in the Midwest, and now you have spent, I don't know where the dividing line is between a few and several, but you're kind of right on the cusp right now of a few and several years in the Midwest. What geotechnical issue in the Midwest has surprised you the most?
So I'm not sure I've been surprised by a geotechnical issue. I think the fun part of geotechnical engineering is there's always something new. Like, no 2 projects are going to be exactly the same. It's one of the things I tell my undergrad students in soil mechanics is that, you know, a structural engineer, no offense to the structural engineers watching this, can take a building that they've designed and transplant it anywhere else. A geotechnical engineer cannot do that. Like, they have to go through and do the site investigations and find the soil properties so that they can properly design the geotechnical infrastructure. And so I think every problem is going to be different, and every situation is going to be different, which is what makes it exciting and fun and never gets stale, in my opinion.
I really love cold weather pavements. Like, I'm kind of obsessed with this, because I think when I was a little kid, it didn't occur to me that there would be different pavement in different places. And then after I'd lived in Virginia for a few years and noticed, oh, the roads here are more crested than they were out in the Midwest. And there's a different coating on top of the pavement. I started to get really interested in that. And so, when I talked to Emil Bautista from Wisconsin, we talked about pavements. We talked about pavements below zero, and that was good for me. So the other question that we ask everybody when they come on Director's Cut is how you first got involved in ASCE and GI.
So that credit goes to my then advisor and now a really good friend and colleague, Professor Binod Tiwari. I was a sophomore undergraduate student. He had tricked me into doing research in geotechnical engineering, which is a story for another time or a bonus question at the end. But at the end of that experience, he said, well, why don't you try participating in the Geo poster competition? So this was Geo Florida 2010. I submitted a poster, an abstract for the competition, and I was not expecting to get anywhere with it, but and we were also working on putting a team together for GeoWall. The GeoWall team wasn't invited that year, but I was invited to participate in the poster competition and made it to the conference in Florida. And to my major surprise, I won first place in that competition. I was just stunned by it, but that was my first exposure to the Geo-Institute. And then I kept coming back for one reason or another, just out of fun, and I enjoyed it. I loved the community. For ASCE, we had an ASCE student chapter at the institution I was at Cal State Fullerton, and my advisor said, go join, go be a part of them, help out. And so I went to their meeting, and then GeoWall was incorporated into one of their activities, and so got involved with them, and then just stayed involved with ASCE. Geo-Institute, my first involvement outside of student competitions was the Student Leadership Council, actually, and we were trying to form the graduate student organizations, the GSOs at Cal State Fullerton, and I got asked to be the one who kind of takes charge of it. So I went to the Student Leadership Council meetings, and the advice that I was given by my advisor was, don't be hesitant to raise your hand and volunteer to do something. So I went in with the expectation that I might raise my hand and do something. And how I usually get myself into trouble, as people would say, is there's a discussion going on something, and I look at it and I'm like, there's a simple solution to this. So the discussion going on at that time was the Geo-Institute had a student leadership page that wasn't very up to date, and they were having trouble keeping it maintained. And so I, of course, opened my mouth and said, well, why don't you just create a Google site page, and you can maintain it, you can update it, and just have the GI link it to them. And I got volunteered to do that. So that's how I ended up on the SLC, and then the rest, I guess, is history.
So we're not going to wait until the end to do that bonus question. We have to know, how did you get tricked into geotech research?
So I say tricked. It was more like it was an unintended avenue. Dr. Chouari at the time he still does this quite frequently. He engages high school and community college students in research that he's going on. And he used to teach the surveying course at Cal State Fullerton. And so he was going to have a series of community college students on campus over summer to create a map of the campus. And he reached out to me and said, you've been my assistant for this course. You know all the equipment. Why don't you lead this team of community college students on doing this? And every summer, my family went to India, and it was no exception this summer. We had already made plans to go to India and go do all sorts of other activities. And he convinced me to come back halfway in summer. When I came back, they were done. They were done with the map. They were done with their analysis. And I was a little upset because I had just cut my trip short and I had nothing to do when I came back. So he said, well, you're taking soil mechanics in a year or so. Why don't you just go work in the lab? I have a student that's doing some tests, and you can go help him with those tests. You'll learn something about what you're going to do. And I was like, well, I'm here. I have nothing else to do, so I'm going to go do this. And so I like to say I got started in research by pushing buttons on a direct shear machine, having no idea what I was doing. For the rest of summer, he taught me a lot about what I knew. He gave me his course notes. He showed me all the ropes. We had written my first geotechnical special publication. My first GSP came out of that work on soil structure interactions with the student that was working on it with him. And then I got to present that at Geo Florida the next year. And so that's how I got involved. And I kept telling him, I'm not interested in geotech. I'm not interested in doing a master's degree. Apparently it fell on deaf ears because I was interested, and I did end up doing a master's and a PhD.
And the more you fight it, I think the more you just guarantee that it's going to happen. You gave us a very good segue here into the next question. You mentioned your summer-long trip to India, and before we started the interview, you mentioned that you did this every year. And on one of these trips, this seems insane to me, you learned to drive. Tell the people a little bit about your driving school experience in India. And this was not rural India. You got to give us the A to Z here.
So, yeah, every summer when we went to India, we did a lot of sightseeing. We did a lot of visiting family. We did a lot of other stuff. But one of the things we always did was we learned something that summer. So sometimes it was learning, AutoCAD, for example, and how to draft. Other times it was learning about, how to draw henna and all of that on your hands. The summer that I went before I was going to get my driver's permit in the United States, my parents decided to enroll me in a driver's school class in Bombay, which is where my aunt lives. And so there was a driving school instructor. The car is something I will never forget. I don't remember the maker, the model, or the year, but I do remember all the amazing features of this car. So let's start with the doors on the back seat. So on the driver's side, the passenger door does not open, period. On the passenger side, the back door opens, but you have to stick your hand through the window of the passenger seat door and open the back door. The handle on the passenger door was broken, so you had to open that from the inside as well. The driver's seat was completely reclined backwards, so you couldn't adjust the seating on it. You could move it forward and back, but that was about all.
Yeah, at that point, what's the point, though,
Yes. The mirrors, the side mirror on the passenger side did not exist. The one on the driver's side existed, and there was a rear view mirror, but the driving instructor had it turned so he could see what was going on. So you learned to drive with just the driver's side mirror. I think the horn worked because that's an essential component of driving in India. The radio did not work. It worked if you went underneath it and you connected a few wires together, and then it worked and you didn't electrocute yourself in the process. There were windshield wipers, but the switch on the steering wheel did not work. So you had to reach over to the passenger side, and in the glove box, there was this one switch you could pull. And when you pulled it, they operated at one speed, but they worked. The odometer did not work. It was just it would go up to 20 kilometers an hour, and that was it. And this was the car, and then you learned how to drive with the clutch, gearbox to change gears, and then all the regular driving stuff that goes into the process.
So it sounds like the driving school knew exactly what they needed to have working in order to function and just called it a day after that.
Well, here's the thing. Having learned to drive on a vehicle like that, you learn to operate under any conditions. So I consider myself a pretty safe driver because with all the other features that we have now, I think I could still drive with the bare minimum.
Those are just, bells and whistles.
Right, like having airbags and having the sensors that tell you when you're going out of your lane and the reverse camera sensors and.
Well, you're tougher than me because I think, if I was going to pick any other country to drive in, it'd be Canada, and that'd be about it. We mentioned that we'd talk about student competitions a little bit later on, and that's where we're going to go now. For everybody who hasn't seen the Geo-Institute student competitions at Geo-Congress or the regional ones, they are a sight to behold. The Geo Wall, the poster that Beena mentioned earlier, Geo Prediction, there's a t-shirt competition. We've got a lot of them, and they're all really good. What do you think the other disciplines, whether it's other civil disciplines, other engineering disciplines, however broad you want to take this, what can they learn from the GI student competitions?
So I can't be on director's cut and be the director of the student competitions, without putting a plug in to everyone that's watching this, for the faculty, please encourage your students to participate in one of the 5 competitions. For the students that are involved, please participate. It's a great way to get involved, get to know more people, more students that are going through the same experiences you have, and to learn something different. And for those that are out in industry, encourage your interns, come support the student events and the activities. Tell us how we can make them better. So I can't be on director's cut and not say that. With that being said, I think there's a lot to learn for everyone. I think for faculty, for students, for industry, there's always something to learn. And every year that we do these events, I feel like I learned something in the process. But for the other disciplines, I think it's a way of reminding them that students are an integral part of our future. And one of the things that I love about the way the Geo-Institute does these events is that students are at our major event. And like Steel Bridge, Concrete Canoe, and the variety of other ASCE competitions that we have, they're always held in these student conferences. And the students interact with each other and they get a lot out of it, but they don't get the interactions that they get with being at a professional conference and being with people. And from a professional point of view, you don't get to see who are the next talented, bright, geotechnical, civil, or just in general, the next bright people in your field if you don't interact with them. And this is a great, fun way to do it. You get to see how well they take success, how well they take disappointments and failures, sportsmanship and teamwork and leadership and, communication, both oral and written, and just the spirit of it. It's just so much fun. And I think that there's a lot for the students, but also a lot for us as professionals to learn from those events.
A great sales pitch to get faculty and students involved in future competitions, and hopefully somebody from another discipline watches this too and says, hey, we should do something like that.
So, along those lines, I'll add, if there is another discipline out there and they want to see what we're doing, I'm happy to chat with you about them. And for faculty or graduate students or postdocs, if you want to help, we have tons of places where you can volunteer and get your feet wet. So come send me an email, call me up, do what you need to get a hold of me, and I will get you connected with the right people.
I think if anybody came to us and volunteered and wanted to volunteer, I always laugh at that when people are like, oh, I don't know, is there an opportunity for me to volunteer? Yes, if you would like to volunteer, we're going to find a place for you, believe me. I wanted to ask about mentoring too, and specific part of this. I think back to my undergrad and grad school experiences, and the faculty members that I always tended to gravitate to were the ones on the younger side. I felt like they were more approachable and I could relate to them more. So I wanted to ask you about your role specifically as a young faculty member as it pertains to mentoring students. What has the experience been like for you, and how do you feel like it's important to have mentors that are closer to your age?
So first of all, I'm going to say this, that I think, I can't speak for all disciplines, but for geotechnical engineering, I think that it doesn't matter what age the faculty mentor is at. I can't think of a single person who isn't excited about students. I mean, if you talk about the legends in the field, they are thrilled to be talking to students. And I've had experiences when I was a student where the legend would be telling me, I'm so glad to be talking to you instead of this other faculty member that I was talking to you. So everyone is very approachable. I think it's just scary as students to say, I saw this person's name in the textbook. How can I go talk to them? And so I think it's just a reminder that they are people and they do like talking to students. And that is the reason why most of them were in academia to begin with. And so just, it doesn't matter how old the person is, they are going to have lots of advice and stories to tell you. For me, I think, I'm not going to say what I was about to say, which is I think that there's a lot of students in many of the classes that I take where Our ages are very similar. And when I was just starting off, there was a class that I taught where every person in the room was older than I was, and I was the faculty member. But I think that it is different when you're talking to someone that is younger or closer in age to you, because they've just been through this. Like they're the ones that have recently participated. They know what the new rules for GeoWall are, or they know what the new way that the scholarship is being handled, and because they've just gone through that experience. And it's not to say that the older faculty members don't have those experiences, because they're still guiding their students through these processes quite successfully. It's just easier to say that, okay, when I did this X number of years ago, this is what I did, versus when I did this X decades ago, or this is what I did. I think that part is what makes it a little bit easier to relate. I think in terms of mentoring, though, I still go to my senior faculty and my close colleagues and say, I'm new to mentoring. Like, I've had the opportunity to mentor a lot of students. I've had the opportunity to be in a lot of mentoring situations, but I don't have all the answers. And so when I am mentoring someone and I don't know the situation, I still call up, Dr. Troy and say, Dr. Troy, I'm having this trouble with the student. I don't give names, I don't give specifics, but I'm like, what advice would you have given the student if you were in my place? And say, use that as a benchmark. And I think that I'm still learning to mentor, and it's the learning curve. So it's fun. I love interacting with the students. I enjoy it so much that I keep finding new ways to do it. But I think that there's still a process that's involved.
That's great. And hopefully still learning to mentor in 40 years. I think it's one of those things you better keep accumulating, and you better keep learning how to do it, or you kind of get stuck.
Well, if you don't, you're not going to be able to communicate with the next generation, right? Like, some of the people that I look up to, that I trust, they probably didn't have emails when they were mentoring, when they were students and they were mentoring. And if they didn't think about the best ways to effectively engage their students through emails, for example, then it's very different. And even in the last 2 years, mentoring has changed from in-person meetings to Zoom and WebEx and Teams. And so you're learning how to do this virtually. So if you're not staying current, you're going to lose your connection with the students, and they're not going to feel like they can approach you.
Very good. We have our final regular question and then a bonus question here at the end. You grew up, of course, in Southern California. Iowa, Southern California, of course, there are similarities, but there are also many differences. What part of Southern California would you bring to Iowa? And conversely, what part of Iowa would you bring to Southern California?
So my family, my parents, my brother, a lot of my close friends, they're all still in Southern California. So if I had to bring something, or in this case, some aspects of my Southern California life to Iowa, it'd probably be my family and friends. Like, some of my really close friends, my family, of course, would love to see them in Iowa. I don't know if there's any one particular thing I would bring. I think from Southern California to Iowa, I think Iowa does a good job of being its own place and being different, and I like the differences. Conversely, taking things from Iowa to Southern California, I think that we in Iowa have a better concept of a work-life balance. Like, people have a better understanding of 5 o'clock means work is done, or, weekends are truly weekends. And so that balance, I think, is what I would like to see more of in Southern California. I think that because restaurants are open till 2 a.m, and because it's an always awake type of city, you forget about turning off and shutting down and relaxing and enjoying. And that would be the one thing I would take back, and probably the lack of traffic.
Yeah, that's always a winner. I would like that out here too. You can't go wrong with no traffic. We have to ask a bonus question. It is May. It is, of course, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I wanted to ask you specifically about your reflections being an engineer during, not necessarily just during this month, but reflections on being an Asian American engineer and what it means to have a celebration like this month, and whether you've had any rewarding experiences being an Asian American engineer that you'd like to reflect on for the viewers.
So I think my situation is very special because on one hand, you have Asian Americans, which are not really considered a minority when it comes to engineering groups, right? You see a lot of Indians in my case, or just in general, Asians that are in engineering fields. So they're not a minority. But on the flip side, I'm a female Asian American person. So women are a minority. So I get that kind of different perspective. I grew up in a household where my dad was a civil engineer. My brother is a civil engineer. So there's a family of 4 with 3 civil engineers in it. So engineering and STEM in general was a topic of conversation. I grew up on my dad's construction sites. Some of my earliest memories are actually eating M&Ms on a bulldozer as it was tearing down a building. But I grew up with tools, and those were my toys, and grew up with projects and blueprints and all sorts of stuff laying around the house. And so it wasn't odd to be talking about engineering and that, but it was different being the only woman in some of the classes or being a minority when it comes to women. And I tend to be very unaware of my surroundings at times. Like I get focused on this is what I want to do and this is how I'm going to do it, and I go about and do it. So I don't think I felt the pressures that a lot of my classmates felt of being like the only girl or having to represent that diverse aspect. So I think it's just a balance between that cultural side and the being the gender side that comes with being an engineer, and then specifically a female Asian American engineer. So
that's great. Thank you for sharing. I know these questions, I stick them at the end. Sometimes it's a little clunky and I don't ask them in the most lucid way there, but we appreciate your reflections and for your thoughtfulness on all the other answers that you gave today. It was great getting to know you. And for all of our viewers out there, if you liked what you saw, and I always say you're here at the end, so you probably did, click subscribe, click get notifications. We will always keep you updated when we put something new on the YouTube channel. So Beena, thank you for doing this today.
Thanks for having me on Director's Cut.
I think it was a lot of fun. And for all of our viewers, we will be back with another great Director's Cut interview in 7 days.